Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, the Trump 2.0 Agenda. We're taking a deep dive tonight on the extremely important policies and solutions that President Trump, as well as the Republican Congress, will be deploying over the next 100 days and beyond. And over the next hour, we're going to be talking to some of the players on the front lines of that extraordinary transformation of America. Now, we're very lucky to bring you this conversation tonight in partnership with our friends at AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now, over the summer and fall of last year, I was fond of telling our viewers that the easy job of the 2024 election would be winning the election, and that the harder job would be governing a country that suffered so much harm the last 4 years from inflation, insecurity, and insanity. It's a big job for Republicans who now control the House and Senate and White House, but it's made more challenging by the GOP's razor-thin margins in the House and Senate. They're all going to need to be on the same page to get major progress done. Now, that said, the new Trump administration got off to a roaring start, and congressional Republicans now have a chance to help the president do something great. And as President Trump has said numerous times since taking office, it's about launching a new golden age for America. Now, how can they do that? Well, getting off to a good start is a must, and that's why the Trump 2.0 agenda needs to tackle topics like taxes to unleash the American economy. It needs to put a final end to DEI policies that are crippling the government's ability to govern effectively and have the most effective workforce. They also need to put a stop to the outrageous government spending that has created a national debt which is turned into an existential crisis for the nation. And they must, of course, also protect free speech, something we're going to talk about in one of the blocks tonight. All of these things got a running start with President Trump's executive orders earlier this week, but there's a lot more work ahead. Now, joining the show with me tonight for the whole conversation will be, for our guests, our House Ways and Means Chairman, Jason Smith, to talk about taxes and protecting Social Security. Congressman Glenn Grothman from Wisconsin will be talking here about dismantling DEI programs and policies in our government. We'll also have Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Congresswoman from Georgia, who is actually the head of the DOGE Commission in the House. She'll help us understand how they're going to cut the size of government and spending and make it more efficient. And we're also going to talk to the author of President Trump's groundbreaking executive order ending censorship by the government. But first, we must be able to have a good conversation about what you can do. And I want to bring in my amazing co-host for the evening. She's also a very good friend, AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber. Rebecca, AMAC is going to be a big part of the success of the Trump presidency because all that job that we just talked about above is going to require a grassroots army. I know you guys are ready for the job.
We sure are, and boy, are we thrilled. Talk about a roaring success, a whopping 46 presidential actions taken on January 20th alone, 4 appointment announcements. I mean, John, as you outlined in a very recent article, President Trump has articulated a vision, and that's centered on security, prosperity, accountability, and fairness. And we heard that throughout his inaugural address. And while executive orders have been instrumental in initiating these changes, President Trump recognizes that the lasting and comprehensive reforms do require legislative action. That's where AMAC comes in. AMAC action plays a critical role in really shaping and supporting legislation that aligns with the values and priorities of America's seniors and American patriots. AMAC action is a powerful voice, John, very powerful on Capitol Hill. We're building relationships with lawmakers, testifying before congressional committees, and really rallying grassroots support to influence policy decisions. So, John, we are so excited to see all that we can do together in 2025.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. I know after 2 decades of covering Washington, when AMAC gets involved, it's a political tsunami. 2 million extraordinary patriots working together. It makes change happen, and it's going to be fun in this new environment to see how that change goes. And over the next hour, we're going to work on that together and help people understand what's on the horizon. All right, joining us now, the man who will be the quarterback for the exciting tax cuts that Donald Trump has promised. He's the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Jason Smith. Sir, good to have you back on the show.
It's great to be with you as always.
We were talking during the break. You are eating, sleeping, tax cuts day in and out, tax policy. Tell us what's on the horizon in your committee.
You know, John, we have control. Republicans have control of the White House, the House, and the Senate because of President Trump. We would not have any of those if it was not for what he campaigned on, what he pushed for. 77 million Americans supported that. And President Trump has not been wasting 1 second in delivering on everything that he promised when it comes to growing the economy, making sure that businesses are not strangled by regulations, you name it. And so what we are focused on is making sure we're delivering on the president's economic proposals when it comes to tax relief for small businesses, for working families, from farmers. We have to extend and make permanent President Trump's tax cuts that will be expiring at the end of this year. If we don't, every single American, John, will face the highest tax increase in the history of our country. And failure is not an option. We will not allow that to happen. But Congress should not be kicking the can down the road. Let's deliver on those policies now. We know exactly what the president's asked for and what the American people expect. Let's get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Under a Trump administration, how should Congress address the challenges of balancing tax cuts with funding these critical programs like Social Security and Medicare? Are there any specific tax reforms that you would prioritize really to ensure economic growth, but also safeguarding these important programs?
Well, for the last 2 years, we've been reviewing and looking at the expiring tax provisions, but the entire tax code of what are the things that we could do that create economic prosperity and growth. We need to increase our GDP. If you increase our GDP to 3%, that's not a huge number. If you increase that by 3%, you'll bring in more than $3 trillion of revenues into the coffers. That will help lower the deficits, but also we need to be cutting spending. Think about this. Over the last 50 years, revenues coming into the country has consistently stayed right at 17% of GDP. However, spending has typically been about 20% of GDP. However, in the last 5 years, we have seen spending of a percent of GDP being 26%. That's why you're seeing record deficits. And it's discretionary spending and mandatory spending that we have to look at. And there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of inefficiencies. I think just providing efficient technology when it comes to healthcare can save a lot of money, hundreds of billions of dollars within our system.
Yeah, so there's clearly a lot of strong evidence, a lot of good research on that. So I want to ask a little bit about if there are some savings from DOGE, is there an appetite in Congress to take some of those savings and buck up the Social Security and Medicare funds, which are hurtling towards insolvency in less than a decade now?
You know, the president has been crystal clear. We need to protect and preserve Social Security and Medicare. We all know that both of these programs become insolvent by 2032, 2033. That year shifts back and forth, and Congress is going to have to act. Unfortunately, you see Congress too often. You kick the can down the road, and they like to pass things in an emergency. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the building are like, well, we can just extend the Trump tax cuts in December. Are you kidding me? This is what everyone hates about Washington, John. There's 26 million small businesses right now that's making the decisions of how to invest in their companies, worried, do they have a tax rate of 43.4% or a tax rate of 23.4%? Congress needs to do their job, deliver, create certainty for the economy.
Yeah, important.
You mentioned Social Security, and we understand the looming threat. It's often referred to as the third rail of politics. How do you think the next administration can really break through the political gridlock, implement meaningful reforms? What role do you see bipartisan cooperation playing in this effort?
Anything that you do in regards to Social Security and Medicare has to be bipartisan. It is not something that one party can do. These are two programs that are too important for the American people, and it's something that they need to have certainty in. If you do it bipartisan and accomplish successful bipartisan policies and reforms within Social Security and Medicare to make sure that those programs do not become insolvent, that is the key. Partisan changes will never, ever last.
Yeah, that's a great point. They're too important, too, not to have bipartisan buy-in on them. So I want to ask a little bit about two very popular ideas that Donald Trump ran on during the campaign. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. You'll get that done this year? Are you confident you can get that done?
I don't see any kind of plan where eliminating no tax on tips is not in any tax bill that I send out of the House of Representatives. The president has made that a top priority. John, we are the party of the working class. No tax on tips is in the Republican Party platform. It was put in it in July. Republicans need to deliver on that proposal. Tax relief for seniors is also something that we have to deliver on. Reconciliation creates an obstacle where you can't touch Social Security, but right. You betcha we can still provide tax relief for seniors who are paying high taxes, and we're going to deliver on that.
Wow. Exciting. It's big.
Yeah, Chairman, the national debt is continuing to climb. Economic pressures are mounting on American families. Share a little bit more about what the House Ways and Means Committee's top priorities are for really addressing these issues, but in the short term.
Well, when you're looking at the debt, we're focused, the House Ways and Means Committee is what's in charge of all the revenues coming into the country. And so we're focused on what are those policies that can be pro-growth, that can bring in those revenues, that can reduce deficit spending. The president has made it very clear that he's going to be implementing tariffs. That's revenue that will be coming into the United States. And those are things that we have to consider when we're looking at the overall fiscal health of the nation. We also have to cut some serious spending. There's no question about that. I mean, there's spending still left over from COVID programs. Have Congress withdraw all that money. There's at least over $100 billion. There's employees like the Employee Retention Tax Credit Program. It is a very wasteful, fraudulent program. Eliminate that program. You could save $50 billion. There's numerous ways to cut the spending, create more efficiencies, and grow the economy. Those are the items in the overall broad schemes of what we are doing in the Ways and Means Committee.
Yeah, pretty exciting. Sir, there are, COVID shows us another thing, which was that we had a big problem in our supply chain, and the opportunity that President Trump, and I know you've talked about a lot too, is to create a manufacturing renaissance in America. Talk a little bit about the opportunity for insourcing and getting supply lines back in the United States, and how tax policy and your economic policies might help spur that.
John, we have to make sure that our country is secured with our supply chains. When it comes to food, when it comes to energy, when it comes to healthcare, we need to be secure. If we're not, that means our country is dependent on another nation. And we need to help bring these supply chains back to the United States. That's why President Trump campaigned on creating tax incentives for manufacturing here in the United States. And those are the policies that we will be pushing and advocating for in this tax bill, but also in the trade policies moving forward. We need to make sure American manufacturers, American workers, American farmers are first, not foreign manufacturers, foreign farmers, and foreign workers.
What an exciting notion. Something that's been missing for the last 4 years, but seems to be on the horizon now. Sir, what a great honor for having you on the show today. Thanks for joining us. I know you got a lot of work ahead of us. We're going to be watching it closely. Great to have you on.
Always great to be with you all.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we'll have Wisconsin Congressman Glenn Grothman on to discuss his and President Trump's efforts to end DEI programs, another form of wasteful spending a lot of people see in the government. But before we do that, I want to send you out and give you a homework assignment during the commercial break. Please go to amac.us/no-noise right now. Because for a limited time, you can get 47% off an AMAC membership to celebrate President Trump becoming America's 47th president. Isn't that cool? That's amac.us/no-noise to get 40% off. All right, Rebecca and I will be right back right after these messages. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report brought to you by AMAC, the Trump 2.0 agenda. Listen, no conversation about what Donald Trump is going to accomplish in the next 4 years would be complete without talking about the war against DEI, a liberal philosophy that puts equity get ahead of merit, something most people in this country don't agree with. Our next guest has been on the front lines of this battle long before it was on most people's radar. He's been fighting DEI for years. He's a congressman from the great state of Wisconsin and chairman of one of Congress's most important oversight subcommittees. He is Congressman Glenn Grothman. Congressman, good to have you back on the show.
Glad to be on the show.
All right, you have always taught me about this, and I love the history of this, but DEI's been around with different names for a long time. It just keeps creeping back into government, doesn't it?
Well, right. I think a lot of your listeners don't know because they imply we've got some white racism problem here if they're listening to Joe Biden. But we have had affirmative action in this country that every business going back to 1964 with at least 50 employees has had to fill out a form connected with it. And even though they say it doesn't result in affirmative action, it does. So we've in essence been discriminating against white guys in this country since 1964. More recently, these horrible big corporations have picked up and gone beyond what the government requires and even had DEI departments in which they hire employees to tell their employees how horrible and racist and sexist America is and how we got to look out for the transgenders and this and that. And of course, they're all around the government. They're all around universities. Donald Trump, and one of his great first things he did is he shut down the DEI agencies in the federal government. And the purpose of those, like I said, was to create discord among Americans of different ethnic groups. It seems a little ridiculous on its face because immigrants come here do better than native born. I don't care whether you're talking about people from India, from China, from Philippines, from Cuba, any one of these countries, they do better than the native born. But nevertheless, a goal of the hard left has always been to tear America apart, and one way to do it is get a president there like President Biden who talks about white supremacy, or the clergywoman we had the other day talking about how we're all picking on the transgenders or whatnot. But Donald Trump has removed from the federal government anybody pushing this DEI stuff, which, by the way, really got a second life, you might say, in the 1970s when the borderline communists, and there are such people in the United States, they had wanted to destroy America in the 1960s by dividing America by wealth. And they wanted to make people really jealous of successful people, and they were hoping that's the way they could take down America, as they took down Russia about 60 years before that. It didn't work in the 60s. Americans are too happy and well-adjusted to say, I want a revolution because some guy's got a big mansion or whatever. However, their fallback position was try to divide America and set everybody against, quite frankly, white males. And they've been pushing this in the universities, in big corporations since the 70s and 80s. It really picked up steam under Joe Biden, who really bought into this idea that we've got to tell all the young people that we have a horrible white society and we've got these white supremacists every year, even though I've never run into one of them. And but they sure had a lot of influence on federal government. They hire these bureaucrats who educate their employees how horrible America is. Obviously, the universities, that was right up their alley. Hire a bunch of professors, and whether you're majoring in the field or even just taking a random class, why in the world we'd be paying people to tell our young people we have a horrible country, I don't know. But I'm glad President Trump is on the case. I'm glad we got rid of some of these federal employees. The next thing up is we have to make sure that when we give out government contracts, we give them out to the best company or the lowest bidder, not discriminating against people because they're white males. And that's what was going on under Joe Biden. Hopefully Donald Trump is going to get rid of all of that affirmative action stuff that has been around by law since 1965 under Lyndon Johnson.
Amazing.
It is amazing. Here we have Joe Biden talking about all the white supremacy, and actually what's been going on, they've been discriminating against the white guy for 60 years. That's true.
If I could ask you quickly, President Trump's recent executive order that reaffirms the biological reality of male and female, with this clear directive, how do we ensure that our public schools stop pushing dangerous gender ideologies on children and really prioritize parental rights?
Really hit an important issue here. You know, being a politician, I was out ringing doorbells a few months ago. I ran into two grandmothers, two different households, in which their grandchildren were becoming transgender. And of course, this is something that you never saw when I was a child. It's what happens when we have these horrible people in the schools and in the popular culture educating young kids, oh, you may be a transgender. And it just breaks the hearts of the grandmothers. If the kids don't snap out of it, it makes a mess of their whole life. So I'm glad President Trump has made it clear where he stands on the issue. And as far as schools that are out there, I think you just have to monitor what's going on, monitor, make sure your school board's doing the right thing. And if they're giving any push to this transgender thing, and they do make progress in the schools, you just have to raise holy hell at the next school board meeting and say, what in the world are we doing having guidance counselors tell the young children, you know, that if you're a boy, you might be a girl or vice versa. And I don't mean to pick on the schools. They're a problem. Even worse are the doctors. Yeah. You have doctors, I know in the state of Wisconsin, they're cutting off the breasts of 15-year-old girls. Can you believe that?
No.
I mean, they're out of their mind. It lowers your opinion. I used to think that it was the smart kids who went to medical school. Turns out it's the dumbest kids who went to medical school, which is kind of scary.
Well, we know you're going to be on this for all the time in Congress and the great work you do with your oversight committee. Sir, good to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us, sir. All right, folks, we're going to get to another quick break. When we come back, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to talk about the Doge and cutting. In the meantime, I got a homework assignment for you. It's a good one because you're going to get a great discount. Go to amac.us/no noise right now. You'll get 47% off an AMAC membership. And if that number is not an accident, 47 for the 47th president. Go check it out, amac.us/no noise right now. Welcome back, America. One of the big expectations American voters have is that Donald Trump and his partners in Congress will shrink the government and make it less expensive, less indebted, more responsive to the American people. Well, in order for that to happen, our next guest is going to be on the front lines of exposing how we went off the rails and how we can fix it. She is the chairwoman of the subcommittee that is in charge of DOGE, the government efficiency operation. She's a good friend of the show as well, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. Congresswoman, good to have you on the show.
Hi, John. Good to be here.
We love having you every time you come on. You've been fast at work from the moment you got this assignment. Give us an early idea where where some of these cuts might actually come from.
Well, a lot of these cuts can come from common sense places, believe it or not. The problem here in Washington is a lot of Americans' hard-earned tax dollars get spent in ways that really is incomprehensible. And there's a lot of waste that goes with it. And actually, there's tremendous amount of fraud. And so we're going to be holding hearings and investigations to uncover where this U.S. cash is going that we need to keep right here at home, and that we can cut spending. So I don't want to unveil all of our plans yet, but we can't wait to get started.
I bet. Exciting.
Yes, and President Trump's recent executive order eliminating DEI programs from federal agencies has really sparked some debate. What impact do you believe that this move will have on federal hiring practices and really government operations? And to the critics who argue that it undermines efforts to create a more inclusive and equitable workplace, what is your response?
Well, you know, actually, President Trump campaigned on something that many Americans agree with, and that hiring people, they should be hired on merit. Not by their skin color, their gender, their ideology. It should be about, can they do the job? And so President Trump has put an executive order in place with a hiring freeze for all federal workers. And that was so important to do. He also signed an executive order getting rid of DEI. Well, you can see the resistance is already back at work here in Washington. We just learned recently that someone was the DEI director in one of the departments, quickly changed their name to something like senior policy administrator or some other title. So I think what we're gonna see happen, and John, you are so well aware of this. You've watched it and covered it for years. Is the same resistance movement that was in place in President Trump's first administration is going to be coming back in place and trying to resist President Trump's policies and executive orders again. Just recently, there was a poll, I think it was done by CBS, maybe ABC, I could be wrong over which one, asking federal employees if they planned to resist President Trump's policies. Yeah. And I think it was something like 47% said they were going to resist his policies. So it's been a breath of fresh air watching President Trump sign these executive orders, but it's going to take diligent and important hard work in the PPO department of going through and finding these federal employees that need to be fired, that we need to let go, and making sure that when the freezing, the hiring freeze goes away, we're hiring people based on merit, just like President Trump has asked.
Great idea.
I just want to follow that up with a question. Given the often polarized, I guess I'd call it, political climate, how would you describe the current dynamics and really working relationships among members of Congress, particularly within the House under the Trump administration? Have you noticed any shifts in collaboration or overall attitudes compared to previous terms?
Yeah, I've seen a big change. Ever since President Trump's historic election landslide, I've seen a lot of my Republican colleagues that really weren't Trumpers, maybe were against President Trump, didn't like MAGA. Well, now they're singing praises to the MAGA agenda. I think that's pretty funny because I've watched that big swing of support to President Trump, especially after seeing and knowing these Republican colleagues for pretty much who they really are. But you want to know something? I want President Trump to have all the support. I want all my Republican colleagues in the House to support his agenda because this is the mandate that the American people voted for. This is what they delivered. This is what they want Congress to do, is to support President Trump. Next week, we have our Republican Issues Conference down in Miami, where our entire House conference will be going down, getting to work on the reconciliation bill that we've got to produce. And hopefully we'll come together and get something good for the American people.
Pretty exciting. A lot of work to be done that weekend, I'm sure. Congresswoman, I want to turn to something that a lot of Americans probably don't understand until they read about it, and that is that the government is in the news business. They have all these news organizations, or so-called news organizations, Voice of America, there's NPR, PBS, the Board of Broadcasters. At this moment, when we're 37 trillion in debt, do we need a government-funded news media, or is that something that's going to get some good scrutiny from you?
I look forward to having NPR and PBS come before my committee. That is one we're working on, John, and I'm glad to throw that hint out there. I had also posted about it. You know, PBS attacked Elon Musk just last week and basically called him a fascist when he said, "I give my heart to you." He put his hand over his heart and put his hand out to the people, and he said, "I give my heart to you." That doesn't sound like fascism. That sounds like tremendous support from Elon Musk to the American people. But he was attacked, nevertheless, by PBS, who receives American people's hard-earned taxpayer dollars. And I think they need to come before the committee and explain to us why they deserve that money when they're going to be basically the mouthpiece of the Democrat Party and attack the Democrat Party's political enemies. This can't be allowed, but I look forward to seeing them and having them come before the committee.
That's going to be a fun one, no doubt.
Sure will be. Congresswoman, so many AMAC members were grateful that Trump pardoned the individuals involved in January 6th. But how might you compare those pardons granted by President Biden, specifically the members of his own family? Can you provide some context, I guess, on these actions and share your thoughts on whether there has been any prosecutorial overreach, particularly concerning those imprisoned for their involvement at the Capitol on January 6th?
You know, January 6th defendants, I have been supporting and defending them from day one. I was by myself for a long time there. I was one of the first members of Congress to go in the D.C. jail, and we wrote a report. It's still on my website, green.house.gov, called Unusually Cruel. That came out in December of 2021. This was long before it was popular for any Republican to actually defend these people. and expose how horribly they were being treated and how their rights were being abused. Basically, I've said from the beginning, I was so thankful. I had urged President Trump to give them pardons, full pardons, because these people truly were persecuted by the weaponized government. You didn't see Antifa and BLM rioters get prosecuted this way. Over 95% of BLM and Antifa rioters charges were dropped, and they walked free after burning down American cities and communities night after night and attacking police officers. Then we have President Biden pardon his own family, pardon January 6th committee members, pardon Anthony Fauci, pardon Mark Milley, and he pardoned a lot of horrible criminals, rapists, murderers, child murderers. He pardoned them as well. So, I pretty much let the press have it yesterday because they have a sick obsession with January 6th, and they wanted to ask me and pepper me about, how can President Trump pardon these January 6th defendants and what I had to say about that. And so I pretty much let them know exactly what I think, and I think those videos have made the rounds. Here's the good news. When the press acts like political activists, like Democrat activists, and they abuse their power, which is the power of the press, the good news is the American people now have a platform like X and other social media where they can post the truth and their entire story with it. And we don't have to be controlled by the media anymore. We can go directly to the American people, and that's what I definitely will do.
Yeah, you've done that time and time again, and very effectively. I've seen it with my own eyes. Congressman, we've got about a minute left. I just want to ask one quick question. As you start to rack up savings, and I know you'll rack up a ton of savings with Elon Musk, can some of that money be put towards Social Security, Medicare, so that seniors have a longevity of confidence in the programs? Because they're both heading towards bankruptcy in 32, I think.
Yeah, these are very important programs that seniors depend on. These our grandparents and great-grandparents worked their entire lives and they paid in. And they deserve every single penny back, and they deserve to be taken care of. The government has no right to rob their hard-earned dollars and take it away from them and end these benefits. And Republicans have said that over and over again, even though Democrats lie about us and say that we're going to hurt their benefits and take away their money. Thankfully, President Trump, one of his campaign promises was no taxes on Social Security benefits. I think that is a no-brainer. It's just common sense. And so I've actually shockingly had to argue with some of my Republican colleagues as they don't support that. Some conservatives, you wouldn't believe it, do not support President Trump's policy of no tax on Social Security. Well, you know what? I've taken to the microphone in our conference meetings several times, argued back with them and urged them to go back to their districts and tell the seniors that voted for them and live in their districts that they don't support that. I don't think that would go very well for them. But what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we make these government programs efficient. That means when they need to run well, they need to cost less so they can serve the people that have paid in.
That's going to be a big mission, and one everyone in America is going to be watching closely. Congresswoman, it is always an honor to have you on. It's also fun to just watch you in action. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Great
Good to see you both.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, another big topic for the Trump 2.0 agenda is ending censorship, protecting free speech in America. And after the break, we're going to talk to the man who authored President Trump's executive order protecting free speech. Mike Benz will be here right after the commercial break. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report brought to you by AMAC. Now, no conversation about the Trump 2.0 agenda could be complete if we didn't talk about all the gains that President Trump is already making to protect free speech and to end censorship in federal agencies. A lot of that work was laid early by a group called the Foundation for Freedom Online and its groundbreaking founder, Mike Benz, who was an aide to President Trump in the first administration. He took on censorship head on, and he was the author of that amazing executive order that President Trump signed on Monday to ban all federal agencies, federal contractors, and federal subcontractors from getting involved in censorship anymore. And we're lucky to be joined by him right now. Mike, good to have you back on the show.
Great to see you, John. Hi, Rebecca.
All right. Tell us about this executive order and why it is so important to protecting free speech in the long term.
Well, the executive order is designed to stop the government grants and contracts that provide the economic lifeblood of the censorship industry. And it's important to understand that while we have a censorship industrial complex, the lifeblood of it is the industry. Just like in a war, mercenaries don't work for free. It requires money. In the information war, these censorship mercenaries get their money primarily from the U.S. government. And about 20 different government agencies and bureaus all provide various forms of economic grants and contracts to do counter misinformation work, to do media literacy work, digital resilience work, information integrity work. Now, none of this existed at all until the 2016 election of Donald Trump. The entire field was birthed in order to stop the thing that just happened in November of 2024, that is the election of a populist candidate, whether here in the US or in Europe. And the executive order is broadly defined in terms of the infringement against First Amendment protected speech. But what it does is it's not just the direct ban on federal agencies and bureaus from recreating, for example, DHS's Office of Misdis and Malinformation, but also bars the pass-through grants and contracts and any activity that facilitates the carrying out of infringement of First Amendment protected speech. So there are some loopholes in the sense that some of these censorship programs are farmed out to foreign countries nominally to insulate their populations against propaganda from, say, Russia or China. And there remains the possibility that those programs will simply use those funds to target Americans while not telling anyone. So there has to be a very vigilant effort to stay on top of this. We're actually seeing a similar fight happen in the DEI space right now, where in response to the DEI executive order, there have been at the ATF and at NASA and at other agencies a simple renaming of the offices or of the titles of the executives so that they can do what they're doing but evade the EO. There's now effectively a BOLO, be on the lookout for this at all of the different federal agencies. The same thing is going to need to be done in the censorship space.
Amazing.
Now, AMAC formed as the conservatives' alternative for people 50 plus. Over 2 million members. They're curious, how many NGOs were working with social media companies to suppress content? Can you elaborate there?
Oh, it's thousands globally and hundreds within the U.S. The NGOs form the plausible deniability layer for the U.S. federal government to coordinate and implement this activity under what they call the whole of society doctrine. When Trump won the 2016 election, all these folks got in a room. I literally watched them and have posted many of these clips online and said, Russia and China don't have this problem where an upstart populist politician can upend the political orthodoxy in their countries, but we can't do the Russia-China technique because that would be autocracy. We need to come up with some other structure to accomplish the same result, but do it through a slightly different process. And what they arrived at was this concept of, instead of a top-down total government control mechanism, they would create a whole of society partnership, a vast web of public-private partnerships between the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, the FBI, the National Science Foundation, USAID, and then fund all these different NGOs, all these different activist groups, all these different university centers, as well as private sector pop-up censorship mercenary firms, so that they would be getting government money and government direction, but the technical pressure would be primarily being applied through the NGO layer. So it's become basically a giant growth industry in the nonprofit space to move into so-called disinformation studies or disinformation work because of the handouts from the federal government, much in the same way that DEI was. But it's hundreds in the US and thousands across the world.
Amazing.
Wow. That's really amazing. Do you trust the social media companies who are now aligning with President Trump and his initiatives for free speech?
I trust them as far as I can throw them, and I'm not sure that I could throw them very far. But the nice thing about the system that I see being erected currently is that trust is not a necessary prerequisite to being able to work together. Frankly, I think that Elon Musk has his heart in the right place and also has a strong backbone. I think that Mark Zuckerberg did not want to do 95% of the censorship that Meta has done since 2016. But I think he's got a good heart but a weak spine. And I think what we've moved into now as a movement in terms of free speech activism is really a reconstruction of that same whole of society pressure and motivation of good incentives that we effectively copied from the censors, which is to say that as we speak, if these social media companies were to go too far in the other direction, we have congressional subcommittees who can subpoena them and effectively put them on public trial through hearings or bring them in for on-the-record penalty of perjury transcribed interviews. We have legal folks like America First Legal under Stephen Miller and Gene Hamilton, who've been very effective in this space. We now have a robust press, including you and John and the work that FFO is doing. And we now have an executive branch who is dedicated to wiping this out in the same way they're wiping out DEI. So the nice thing about what we're building now is it doesn't really require trust. The simple ability to modify the incentives by creating good governance structures is probably the strongest asset at our disposal.
And you played such a big role, Mike, in building that. You illuminated first that industrial complex of censorship we didn't know existed, and then you created a deterrent system to protect us in the future. The work that you did at the Foundation for Freedom Online truly made this a freer country. It's such a great honor to have you in the show tonight, my friend.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Rebecca.
Good to have you on. All right, folks, we've got one more break to go, but while we're in that break, we're going to be talking to AMAC's Andy Mangione. He's the field general for AMAC Action. Before we do that, I want to ask you to do me a favor. Go to amac.us/no noise right now. amac.us/no noise, and you'll get an incredible discount on a 5-year membership, 47% off an AMAC membership to celebrate what? The 47th American President, Donald Trump. Go do that now. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, America, to the finale of this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, the Trump 2.0 agenda. It's all brought to you by our good friends at AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. All right, we talked about the big agenda that Donald Trump has, all the work that Congress has cut out for it, all the work that President Trump's appointees are going to have to carry out. Now we're going to talk about what you, staying at home tonight, can do to make it a success. Let's bring back my amazing co-host, AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber, as well as the field general for AMAC's Grassroots Army, AMAC Action Senior Vice President, Andy Mangione. Andy, good to have you back.
Hey, John. Good to be here.
All right. We know that a lot of the big fights that are going to happen in Congress in Washington are issues that AMAC has been leading on for years. Tell us how the AMAC Grassroots Army is going to get involved and make a difference in the beginning of this Trump presidency.
Well, John, we're very blessed to have such an active and engaged membership. And one of the most effective ways that we marshal the grassroots is through our call to action campaigns, where we activate the AMAC membership to contact an elected official on a specific issue. These campaigns, John, can be directed to committee members to pressure them to move a bill out of their committee and onto the floor for a vote. They can be directed to the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, or both to compel them to pass vital legislation. And we also use this same strategy on the state level, where we were successful in 2024 in getting key election integrity and parental rights bills passed in states throughout the country. We can deploy these campaigns on a micro or a macro level, and AMAC members have made us so successful using this strategy that we now count hundreds of thousands of campaign participants among our AMAC Army, and we can do these with very little notice. And we stand ready, John, to activate this Army when the situation calls for it.
Pretty impressive.
So great, Andy. You know, we heard President Trump in his inaugural speech. He emphasized the importance of strengthening national security, fostering economic growth, among so many other things. Share with us the key and main focus area for AMAC Action during the first 100 days of the Trump presidency.
There's a lot going on. It's been a flurry of activity. We've been tracking this. We've been trying to keep up with the president. It's been said that he's done a month's of work in a day and a half, and I have a tendency to believe that. But as far as key issues, for the first 100 days, we want to see those Trump tax cuts. We want to see them made permanent. A lot of our members are still working. As you know, Rebecca, AMAC members skew younger than other members of senior organizations. And a lot of them still work. A lot of them own small businesses. And making these Trump tax cuts permanent would benefit them to expand their businesses, give them the confidence they need to hire more people and jumpstart the economy. That's a very important issue to us. And all the work that's done on the border, protecting seniors in that respect, they are very, very vulnerable to these attacks that we've been witnessing by illegal aliens in cities across the country. The president has done yeoman's work already, but we want to make sure, we want to get that wall built. We want to make sure that the deportation efforts are underway and that we will support them in any way that we can to protect our seniors from this invasion of illegal aliens. We also want to see President Trump follow through on no taxes on Social Security. We want to make sure that seniors have as much money as they possibly can have in their pockets during their retirement years.
Yeah, very important. In fact,
Andy, has AMAC Action scored any legislative successes thus far in the new Congress?
We have, Rebecca. AMAC Action supported the Laken Riley Act. And if you recall, this bill is named after Laken Riley, a college student who was tragically murdered by an illegal alien who had been arrested on a shoplifting charge before the attack. This legislation ensures that illegal aliens who steal or assault a law enforcement officer are detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement instead of being allowed back onto the streets. This bill passed both chambers of Congress, and it will now head to President Trump's desk to hopefully become the first bill he signs into law during his second term.
It's pretty exciting. There's a dynamic that this president and the Congress will face. There are a lot of anti-Trump activists embedded in the government. There are lots of groups that are going to sue and try to stick their leg out and try to trip up the agenda. Tell a little bit, Andy, about how the grassroots can come over some of that resistance just by having everyday Americans get active.
Well, you know, you've said it all in that statement. People don't realize, and this is what we try to emphasize at AMAC Action, people can make a difference. By just getting involved on any level of government, getting involved, for example, bringing us issues in their hometown or in their state that we need to take a look at as an advocacy organization, working the polls, getting involved in the election process. They don't realize how much power they have as constituents and as everyday Americans and everyday citizens. And our demographic, the AMAC demographic, has the time to get involved on a local level, on a state level, and on a federal level. And what we do at AMAC Action is try to educate them specifically on issues, have them encourage them to have those kitchen table conversations with their neighbors, with people they go to church with, and get them involved in the political process and the legislative process as well.
Yeah, great point.
Andy, can you share with us quickly the recent call to action campaign in California that focused on the state legislature's inaction to address the victims of the deadly wildfires that have occurred in that state?
Well, absolutely, Rebecca. Just to catch our audience up, AMAC Action has regional representatives who live in California, and they're dealing firsthand with the failure of leadership in that state with regard to the devastating wildfires. And they were particularly outraged that the state legislature was preoccupied with debating on how to Trump-proof the state rather than focusing their efforts on helping people that are affected by these deadly wildfires. So last week, we ran a campaign to let our California members voice this concern directly to the legislature to call them out to get their priorities straight. The campaign generated over 1,000 messages that were sent to the legislature and Governor Newsom. And just today, the California legislature is expected to vote on a $2.5 billion aid package as initial funding to jumpstart recovery efforts. I'd say AMAC members in California had their voices heard.
That's a tsunami, and that is impact. That is what you guys do all the time. I hear stories all around the country from state lawmakers about how AMAC made a difference in getting common sense stuff done, Andy. Andy, what a great honor it is to have you on the show. Rebecca, what a lot of fun it's been to co-host yet another great special with you. I want to thank AMAC for helping us put on this very important conversation about the Trump 2.0 agenda. Hopefully you know a little bit more about what you can do to make a difference. And one of the things you can do to make a difference right now, You can go to amac.us/no noise. That's amac.us/no noise, or you can point your camera to that QR code right now, and you'll get 47% off any one of their membership programs. Go check that out. Up 47%, not an accident. That's for the 47th president, Donald Trump.